That's right, folks. Another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. Today, we're going to be breaking down the top streamers and flex plays for Week 10 that can help you win your fantasy leagues. Watch us as we dive in to tell you why Daniel Jones will be dominating in Germany starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. And as always, my favorite streamer, honestly, if my go-to guy, if I'm like, you know what, I need a big week, I'm down big, it's Derek Favret. You can follow him at Derek_Favret on Twitter. What's going on, Derek?
Doing well, Bobby. Another week, another series of victories.
So we're about to head into week 10, 9 weeks in, officially over that halfway point of the fantasy season, not including playoff. If you include playoffs, we're halfway over, but we're way beyond the halfway point of the regular fantasy season for fantasy football. How are your teams doing so far? Do you feel the fantasy love right now?
For the most part, yes. A couple teams have had some tough luck the last couple of weeks, but what I'll say, the important leagues, we all have our important leagues, doing pretty well in all those. So yeah, I feel pretty good.
Yeah, I got one team under 500, and it is the most frustrating team, and it's all my fault. I am the worst manager of all time. I'm a great general manager. I know what players to pick up, and I don't know what it is about this team. I always pick the wrong players to play, and I could tell you I'm right now 3-6. I probably should be realistically, I would say 6-3, just from the decisions I've made. And honestly, I could make an argument for 7-2 probably. So it's rough. I feel bad because the team plays well. The guys are trying out there. They're giving me their best shot. They're trying their best to get their way into the starting lineup, and I'm just not listening to the right people. So it's on me. I take full ownership. But the rest of my team's really good. So I got to figure out a way to run the table. I'm doing a double tight end this week. I'm doing Taysom Hill and Mike Gesicki. So things are going to get real weird this week.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for that.
Yeah, and we can't go by without saying, too, this is the last week for the best ball aspect of the Raz Bowl as well. Week 10 ends the best ball, and then it's playoffs. You got to be in the top 6 in your league to make the playoffs. I'm in 7th in mine, about 45 points out of 6. So I've got a couple waivers in tonight. Solidify the roster, make up those points, and I'll be hopefully in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's the last day of waivers too, folks. You cannot make waivers rest of season. So if you're watching this, and by the way, waivers run in about an hour. 9 o'clock Eastern time, I believe, is the time they run.
That's right now, actually.
All right. Well,
in fact,
sorry.
We just missed it.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I thought it was 9 p.m. Central. I'm sorry, 9 p.m. Central.
I think you're right.
9 p.m. Central. So we have about another hour if you haven't had a chance to go out and fill. I actually looked at my team, and I'm kind of like, all right, this is the first time ever. And I've been doing Raz Bowl. Oh, my God. The wind's blowing so fast that it scared the shit out of me. I was like, what is that? Because I have headphones, but all I hear is the shaking of the wind of the blind, and it sounded like a rattle. I'm like, all right, here we go. I'm going to die live on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. But anyway, so this is the first year where I've actually been on top of the waivers ever. The last few years, I haven't had a quarterback. Like sometimes, like there's been 2 seasons where both quarterbacks got hurt, and I didn't pick up a guy, and then I wasn't playing quarterbacks for the last month, and I'm like, this is so stupid, and it's on me because I always forget that the Raz Bowl has very unique aspects to it. Like the waivers end this week, next week starts you have to start your players, but I think we'll do a better job kind of promoting that. So get out there, folks, and update your waivers on the Raz Bowl Fantasy.
You got 55 minutes to get your waivers in.
All right. So today, though, we're going to be talking about Week 10 streamers and flexes, going into some QB tight end streamers, and also talking some running back flexes that we can look at this week that might be able to shove into your lineups, especially if you're missing some of the key guys in your roster. But obviously, before we start the show, make sure you subscribe to the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. We do a lot of fun stuff on the channel. We have the waiver show, this show. We have the slot versus wide. We have Beat On and Rudy as well. They do their weekly show. We talk about key starts, matchups, and all that. And then Sunday Live, we do our live show for 2 hours every Sunday. Even if you don't have start-sit questions, we do bring a lot of insight, whether it's just the general Q&A on the start sits, but also talking about key injuries and weather updates, everything you need to know up until kickoff. So a lot of fun stuff go on Sunday. So make sure you subscribe to the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel and then jump over to IG and TikTok and finally go to razzball.com. We have a bunch of great articles from a bunch of great writers, but the tools are a lot of fun too. The slot versus wide, the home versus road. And that's kind of what we're going to use today, our tools to help navigate. Are the matchups really as good as they seem? Is there anything behind the numbers that we need to know about? So let's break down the QB streamers first. And before we start, the first player we're going to talk about is going to be a player that I'm going to need you to tread lightly. Okay. He's kind of like my redheaded, as a redhead, I can say this. He's my redheaded stepchild. It's Daniel Jones, who's playing against the Panthers in Germany, by the way. When I was doing this yesterday, I totally forgot about the Germany game. And then I was like, oh, they're playing in Germany. And so before you get into some of the numbers with Daniel Jones, obviously Panthers, 6th most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. Some of the interesting things I found out through the Germany game specifically. I don't know if you dove into any of that stuff, Derek, but what I found is that 2/3 of the quarterbacks, there's only been 6 teams that played in Germany, 3 games, obviously. 4 of the 6 quarterbacks did not hit 200 yards passing. The only 2 that did so were Geno Smith and Tom Brady, I believe, back in the day, their first matchup, the Seahawks, Tampa Bay Bucks. Patrick Mahomes did not hit 200 yards passing in his game. I think last year it was the Colts, Patriots, who had Gardner Minshew and Mac Jones. So not expecting a lot there. But at the same time, I thought it was notable that only 2 of the 6 have hit 200 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. So, but what other information? Now, Daniel Jones, I believe, is better on the road. But what did you really find about Jones? Are you able to stream him if you need to this week?
Yeah, so I am all in on Daniel Jones this week as well. So yeah, I'm no reason to tread lightly here. No, this is a great matchup, and if any time we're going to add a third name to that list of throwing for over 200 yards, this is it. I mean, the Carolina Panthers are averaging over 235 yards per game to quarterbacks. So I think it looks really good for him. 5 of the last 7 games over 20 fantasy points. He's got a 6 touchdown, only 3 interception ratio since week 3. And the one thing, I watched quite a bit of the game last week, and his mobility seems to be back. I think that's going to be a big key this week. You certainly can run on the Panthers. I mean, they're only averaging 1 sack per game over the last 4, so they're not getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. So Jones should have time. He should be able to move around the pocket, maybe get some yards. I mean, he was really lowering his shoulder and really going against the defense there last week. So he did have a rushing touchdown as well. So I think overall, this is a really good spot for Daniel Jones or a streamer to quarterback league. He's a great fit, and yeah, I'm all in with him this week. I like this matchup a lot.
Ooh, yeah. So some of the things that maybe this is a narrative, maybe it's not, but like the Giants defense is going to be a popular streamer this week against Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that Bryce Young, maybe something happened. He has looked a little better the last few weeks as the starter. The only thing that kind of worries me a little bit is that you can really crush the Panthers on the ground. This might not be a high-scoring game. So honestly, if maybe 1 touchdown, 200 yards, and 50 yards rushing is probably realistic for him. But
hey, that's going to be enough.
Yeah, I mean, it will be about. I mean, it depends on how many fantasy points you get per touchdown pass, but that's like 17 fantasy points or 19 based on the format you're in. So, I'm Daniel Jones plays better on the road. It's clear in our numbers. It is what it is. He's proven that against the Seahawks. He proved that against the Steelers, where he had better games, and then he goes home against like the Eagles, and he looks absolutely terrible. Even though last week in the second half he played very well against the Commanders. So I listen. I like it. I'm actually starting him potentially ahead of C.J. Stroud if Nico Collins does not come back.
Yeah, I like that.
If Collins is back, I'm playing Collins. If Collins is back, I'm playing Stroud. If Collins sits again and it's just Tank Dell again against Detroit, I'll probably pivot to Daniel Jones if I have to.
Yeah, that's a slam dunk for me. I agree. You got to start. In fact, I have him as my number 7 quarterback this week. That tells you how much confidence I have in Daniel Jones. I have him over Mahomes, even Joe Burrow going to Baltimore, ironically. So, yeah, I like Daniel Jones this week.
I would take Burrow. I think that Ravens game is going to be fun.
I know
there's no.
I agree.
I know no T Higgins is tough, but Mike Gesicki. We'll be talking about him in a minute.
Yeah, we will be talking about him. So.
Another guy I want to talk about quickly is Tua Tagovailoa. In a shallower leagues, 10-team leagues, he has been dropped a decent amount and hasn't really proven a lot yet. He does have a little bit of a home road split, I believe, and he is on the road this week against the Rams, who allow the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Thoughts about Tua this week on the road?
Yeah, he is a little better at home. There's no doubt about that. But what I really picked up with Tua is that he's moving, he's getting comfortable again. Not to say that he was, going slow when he came back in the 2 games. I mean, he's completing 80% of his passes over these last 2 games since his return, with 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, it's not, I think our expectations with Tua are just so high, with Hill and Waddle in particular. They're just so high that, I mean, he's playing well. The Rams have allowed an average of 300 yards and 2.5 touchdowns over the last 2 games, between Geno and Sam Darnold. So I like this spot for Tua. He's definitely a flex play. Your two tight end in your super flex. He's definitely a play at the Rams. Again, I'd be a little bit stronger, maybe even quarterback. Your starting quarterback 1 if he was playing at home. But again, a little bit better at home versus the road. But overall, he's definitely in your quarterback streamer category.
After what Joe Flacco did to me last week, I got to tell you, the Colts, they hurt. They hurt me emotionally. I honestly, Sunday Night Football was a lot to watch. A lot of Josh Downs, Pittman, Joe Flacco. I even have Jonathan Taylor in the league, which just never happens. And it was just brutal. So hopefully the streamers, Daniel Jones, you can't let us down this time, buddy. All right? We'll be watching from all the way in Germany. Do your thing. Honestly, we love every second of it. All right. Let's do that in the tight end streamers. And so I actually like a couple guys. And I asked you to add one, so hopefully you got some info on him. But the first one I'm going to talk about is Daniel Jones' tight end, Theo Johnson, the rookie. Holy cow, he's looking pretty good the last few weeks. He had a good game last week. The Carolina Panthers allow the most fantasy points in PPR to tight ends. So is there a chance that Theo Johnson could be in your lineups this week?
There's a chance. I'm probably going to say he's going to be just outside of my streamers. I mean, his target share has been pretty sporadic. I mean, he does have 10 targets in the last 2 games. And then, of course, he got into the end zone last week against the Commanders. So he is definitely trending up. And of course, the matchup is just fantastic. But, it really is sporadic. With Tracy coming on and then, of course, splitting a little bit with Singletary and then Neighbors and Wandale. There's a lot of targets there for Jones. And I don't know, I'm just a little leery that he's not going to get as many touches that we really need for him to be a solid flex option or a streamer option for us. So I'm probably going to be out on him. I need to see it a little bit more. Let me just preface it that way. I like what I'm seeing lately, but I still think that there's better options at tight end this week rather than Theo Johnson.
And we might have those, by the way, in our streamers. And by the way, just speaking of Tyrone Tracy, I did offer this is a keeper league. It's not really that relevant because I have crazy wide receivers in this league. I have Rashee Rice also on IR, Nico Collins, Amon-Ra, Cooper Kupp as my core. Josh Downs is my wide receiver 5. I have a lot of good receivers. My running backs aren't. I offered Brian Thomas for Tyrone Tracy to a guy. Thoughts on that? I mean, the other guys, wide receivers right now are like Khalil Shakir and nobody knows. He had Chris Olave who got hurt.
Yeah.
So thoughts on that trade?
Well, if I was the other guy, I would be looking to improve my receivers, and Brian Thomas is a really good ad. So if I could
Yeah.
afford to trade Tracy, if I had enough solid running backs that I could afford to trade Tracy and get a upside wide receiver like Brian Thomas Jr., I'm making that deal. Yeah.
All right. Let's hope he makes that deal then, baby. I need running back. But Chuba Hubbard is my sweet angel. He's been awesome all year, but Jonathan Brooks is coming back. I do
Yeah.
have Brooks, but I don't know what the hell is going to happen with that share. Like they could go 50-50 this season because of how good Chuba's looked, and they don't want to overload Jonathan Brooks. Honestly, I don't really know what to think about that situation rest of season.
Yeah. Yeah. Chuba would have looked really good in a cowboy uniform, at the trade deadline, frankly. I think he would have been a really great fit there, but didn't happen. So.
All righty. The next one I want to talk about for tight end streamer is Taysom Hill. And Taysom, by the way, we talked about him a bunch last week, not on the episode, but after the fact, once we got more information about the injuries. Now with no Chris Olave, Hill has really taken on a really nice role over the last few weeks. That last week, he really came through for us. He's got an okay matchup against the Falcons, but he specifically earlier this season in week 4 had 2 rushing touchdowns against the Falcons, and now he could get additional receiving work, especially with all the injuries to the wide receivers for the Saints. Thoughts about Taysom Hill? Is he in your lineups this week?
Yeah, definitely. We just talked about Johnson, and I was a little skeptical because of the touches. Well, if you look at Taysom Hill, he's getting touches. He had just last week 5 rushing attempts, 5 targets, and even a pass. So he's getting, on average 10 to 12 targets per game. And now with Olave out, you expect that between Kamara and Hill, 2 of their most upside players, you're going to get him the ball, whether it's with a rush or passing in the passing game. You mentioned Atlanta is pretty good against the rush, but they're not as good against receivers or tight ends, frankly. So there's just so many ways that they could use him. There's just so much potential there. I think you have to play him, frankly, and we talk about our tools on our home road. He is a little bit better at home. He's been about 11% better at home versus on the road. This game's going to be in New Orleans, so. Between all that and the fact that they just need their skilled players, the ones they have left, frankly, to come out and shine, he's one of them. He's healthy. He needs to be in your lineups.
He also so dating back to last season too, he's had very productive games against the Falcons specifically. So last season in 2023, he had 10 total touches, 4 receptions, 79 yards. So right there, he gets you 11 PPR points that game. And then in the second game, he had 9 touches, 2 receptions, but he had 81 yards. So another double-digit fantasy point day. Did not find the end zone, but if he can get you 10 fantasy points at tight end, that's what we're talking about. I mean, that's all you care about. But the other thing is with the injuries specifically to the running backs, they are kind of forced to give him the ball. And the other thing is he is their best red zone weapon. So no offense to Alvin Kamara, who's awesome too, but Taysom Hill is an absolute beast down there. So getting those looks are key.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as tight end goes, again, just to the fact that he has so much potential all over the field, I have him above Dalton Schultz, Dallas Goedert if he's back, Zach Ertz. I mean, I have him above those guys. Kyle Pitts, even, frankly, I have him over him. So, he's definitely a starter this week. And even depending on your depth, you might even put him in a flex. And like you said, run your two tight ends.
Super stoked. Things I've gotten to a dark place in my life as I'm double upping on tight ends. I'm all stoked to scoop up tight ends to help me in my flex. Things are great in that league. But the other thing is there has been a little bit of like a drag. I mean, the tight end position, like when you talk about guys like Kincaid, for example, hasn't really been special this season at all. And then you look at like Tucker Kraft kind of up and down a little bit too with, things like that last week. And then Ferguson and, with the injury to Dak Prescott, Honestly, there's scenarios where I'd rather take the upside of Hill against one of those mainstay tight ends. But like, for example, like I'm having the biggest issue with Dalton Kincaid because the matchup this week for him is a smash matchup against the Colts, I believe, this week. So
yeah,
I want to like bet on him, especially with Keon Coleman banged up and also Amari Cooper dealing with a wrist injury. But it just hasn't really happened much this season for him. So honestly, there's going to be scenarios where I would be okay starting a guy like Taysom Hill, knowing by the end of this week, if guys are out again, like Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller's on IR, Chris Olave, by the way, we're worried about Tua. By the way, Chris Olave's had 5 concussions over the last few years, like as a pro. Like this is a guy who might be out a month of the season. They could put him on IR. He could be gone for a long time. And then you're dealing with guys like, Wilson. Cedric Wilson hurt his shoulder. Bub Means is on IR. Shaheed is out for the season. The Saints are looking for, at this point, they fired their head coach. They're probably looking for those, they're just trying to win games to like salvage their jobs at this point. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Hill gets like a complete utility role again. So don't mind the start if you need to start him, if you need some juice in your lineup this week as well. All right, the last one I want to talk about is Thursday Night Football, is Mike Gesicki, who with T. Higgins now doubtful this week. But I think the other big key with Mike Gesicki is Eric All, the rookie, is also out for the season. And so that really kind of upticks his usage, not only with T. Higgins with targets, but just playing time with that rookie out. They do use a lot of tight ends, Drew Sample, Tanner Hudson. I'm not saying that, but they really like the rookie, and he was getting a lot of looks. So honestly, there's something here for Mike Gesicki, who, by the way, faces the Ravens. The Ravens are 11th most fantasy points allowed to tight ends. What's your thoughts here? Is there anything in the numbers we should be worried about with Gesicki this week?
Yeah, well, two things. First of all, it's what I find his output is in his fantasy success, frankly, is really based on the number of targets. If we can project that he's going to get 6 or more targets, or even 5 or more targets, he's a double-digit fantasy scorer. In fact, 3 games he's had between 6 and 9 targets. He's had double-digit fantasy points in all 3 of those games. 6 games where he's had less than 5, his highest output has been 8 fantasy points. So he's really a creature of how many targets that he gets, frankly. And with, like you said, Higgins out and all out, we might project that he's going to be on the higher end. And when that occurs, then he is a good fantasy producer. But the other thing I found, though, he is 69% better at home in our home road splits than he is on the road. And they're in Baltimore tomorrow night. So, if you believe in the home road splits, he is not that. It suggests that he's probably not, the tight end streamer for you this week, if you believe that. So, little bit of mixed bag. I think some of the logic with the injuries tells you that he should be part of the game, but on the same token, he's a lot better at home versus on the road. So, a little bit of mixed bag there. I'm probably not going to play him if I have, one of the other options. Like, for instance, we were talking about Taysom Hill. I'm playing him. Mark Andrews with in that same game with Isaiah Likely out tomorrow. Mark Andrews, I'm playing him. TJ Hawkinson, Kate Otten. These are all tight ends that I'm going to play over Gesicki this week. Probably Kyle Pitts as well. So he's down there a little bit in the list. If I have to play him, I'm not gun shy, but I think there's better options out there.
So I will say this: the home road split tool. The problem with some of the data is that, one, when you're dealing with guys who are more reliant on other players being out, it's going to get skewed because T. Higgins missed 3 of 4 games at home. So those numbers are going to tilt now towards Gesicki being better at home because T. Higgins ironically missed the home games. Now, granted, on the road in Kansas City, he went 7 for 91. So he has done it without T. Higgins on the road against the Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs are the best matchup on the week, but 7 for 91 is a huge performance. And so, and we just saw what Cade Otton did to the Baltimore Ravens. So the other thing that just the last caveat for Mike Gesicki is that the number one team in air yards allowed this season is the Baltimore Ravens. And believe it or not, Mike Gesicki's ADOT is very big. They use him down the field. He had a 14 ADOT, was right next to Jamar Chase last week. So there's something there. I'm buying into it, especially because I have to emotionally to support my fantasy team. But it's also just so many, I think the home road split thing too. The other thing I like to caveat here is that if guys change teams, like he wasn't on the Bengals last year, and this is a rolling 18 weeks. So there's going to be some data from the previous season. So it's a little tough. So that's why we come on the show and kind of give more context around the data itself. But yes, it's a good point about their home road. Yeah. Players, the role players on teams typically play better at home. So you might be onto something there as well.
Yeah, I will say it is probably a little bit skewed because if you look at week 4 against Carolina, which obviously is a great matchup, he only had 1 target. And then in week 6 against the Giants on the road, he had no targets. And then the following week in Cleveland on the road, again, 1 target. So some of those, those low target games that I spoke of, all were on the road. So
and with T. Higgins in the lineup.
Right. So that definitely, like you said, it'll skew it a little bit. So yeah, I mean, you're talking me into it a little bit. I might bump him up my tight end list a little bit. I still think I like some of the other matchups a little bit better, but I'm not. I might have to put a prop bet on him actually tomorrow.
That a boy.
No, yeah, that's. If you can't fit them into your lineup, there's other ways to take advantage of our data. So.
Yeah. 10.5 fantasy points, I believe, is his player prop in PPR for Prize Picks. So I might be taking him up on that this week. All right. Yeah. RB Flex options this week. And if you haven't watched the show, I jump on Friday with Ben Wisey to talk wide receivers and the slot versus wide tool. So forgive us. We don't have any wide receiver data here today, folks, but we promise you we'll have a shit ton of wide receiver data on Friday. So join us on Friday. Let's talk about quick RBs that I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on based on the data. It's hard to find some running backs this week that are kind of outside the top 24 who have decent matchups and people might be considering starting. The first one is Rico Dowdle against the Eagles. Now, in our adjusted line yards matchup metric that we have on the back end, this is one of the better matchups on the week. However, the Eagles have been really tough against running backs this season. They're 29th in fantasy points allowed. However, they are home against the Eagles. The Cowboys always play better at home. Yes, it's Cooper Rush this week, so that could be a huge factor. What's your thoughts in this matchup? Is Rico Dowdle startable this week?
Yeah, this one's tough. I'm probably going to lean towards a no, unless you're just really thin at running back. The Cowboys generally are better at home, but we find with Dowdle, he's actually pretty neutral. He doesn't have quite a home field advantage as some of the other players do. One thing I did note, though, you mentioned Philadelphia is pretty good against the run, but for as far as running back targets, they're only 20th in the league. So you can take advantage of, as a running back, take advantage of the Eagles in the passing game. And, logically you're thinking with Cooper Rush there, maybe a short swing pass out to Dowdle is going to be, his outlet, for a lot of his passing attempts. So have an option there. Rico's had, again, not with Cooper Rush, but he's had 5 targets each of the last 2 games. So he's been a little bit more involved in the passing game. And again, I think having the new quarterback there and just having Rico as an outlet, maybe chip on the edge and then just drop out in the flat for a short pass. That might be a way to exploit the Eagles and keep the Cowboy offense on the field. So you could talk me into it, but again, it's all going to be based on your roster. And if you've got other more solid running back options, I'm probably going to lean the other way.
The other thing we have to factor in is CeeDee Lamb is questionable this week. I don't know really what the data is. I see week to week, but he might play this week. Pro Football Doc has him pretty, questionable as well. So when you look at Cooper Rush, by the way, it's not like we haven't seen Cooper Rush play games. He did start a handful of games back in 2022.
Right.
Essentially weeks 1 through 6, we saw Cooper Rush that season. And like CeeDee Lamb, 400 yards receiving in those 6 games, 2 touchdowns. Noah Brown, 289 and 1. There was something there. Tony Pollard only had 13 targets in 6 games. Zeke Elliott only had 8 in 6 games. Not sure what that exactly means, but it doesn't look like he was dumping down to running backs in those spot starts. It looked like he hyper-targeted CeeDee Lamb, which, by the way, hey, Cooper Rush, you get it. It's smart. He's a ginger. He understands the leash is short as a ginger. You can't mess up out there. He got it done. But I will say this, if there's no CeeDee Lamb, that's definitely going to help Enrico Dowdle this week as well. So I think there's a lot of moving parts here. That being said, it doesn't sound like Rico Dowdle's a terrible start in this matchup.
No, not a terrible start, but I think you're right. Keep an eye on the CeeDee Lamb playing status. I mean, everyone's going to anyway who owns them, but like you said, I mean, Lamb was averaging 10 targets per game with Cooper Rush those first 6 games of 2022. So there's definitely something there. But if he's out for any reason, or even limited, frankly, if the intel tells us that he's probably going to be limited in his workload, then it's got to go somewhere. And, they don't have really any other options in the backfield. So Dowdle might be a play, but again, I'm in a best case scenario, I don't have to count on him, but if you need to, then there's potential.
Yep. Yeah, Gene, we get to your question in just 1 second. We're going to wrap up one more item here, and then we'll get to your question. I will say this, though. CeeDee Lamb, let's talk about him really quick before we get into our last player, because we're on the topic of Lamb. With Cooper Rush, of course, I don't think Lamb offers you the elite upside anymore. Right. Like, he was an absolute game wrecker last year with Dak Prescott. I think that upside is kind of gone. If you look at his stats from a few years ago, the 409 and 2 touchdowns essentially in the 6 first games, like he was like a back end wide receiver 1, maybe high end wide receiver 2. That being said, Dak will be back probably at some point this season, probably after a month. He only has a hamstring injury. I'm sure he'll be back after his IR stint. That will probably bring him back for the fantasy playoffs. So if you are a number 1 seed, are you willing to acquire CeeDee Lamb on the cheap if the team in your league is a fringe playoff team who needs wins now? And like, if that's the case, what's a fair trade offer for CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, if I'm the team looking to acquire in that scenario, I want to do it before this weekend because I agree with you. I actually exactly what you said. Low end wide receiver 1, maybe high end 2. Ceiling's a little bit lower, but it doesn't mean it's not there. So if they come out and they connect, I mean, Cooper Rush, he's been around for a while. I mean, he knows the offense, he knows the players. I mean, he's not just, a second string coming in and you're just holding on for dear life. I mean, he knows this offense and he knows how to play. So if I'm buying, I need to do everything I can to buy him before Sunday. Because I fear that he's going to be, 85% of CeeDee Lamb, and then that owner is going to realize I can afford to hold him, or they're going to be asking for way too much. So if I'm buying, I'm buying this week.
T. Higgins for CeeDee Lamb.
I would prefer CeeDee Lamb.
Okay, even if you're a win now team. Let's say you're a fringe playoff team and you need to win now to get.
Yeah, because honestly, I'm not sure what we're going to see out of Higgins the rest of the year. Frankly, is he going to? I mean, does he have the Devontae Adams injury? That, and he's not moving anymore. I mean, he's there with the Bengals the rest of the season now. So I just don't think his head is in the game. I think he's looking towards his future, and I'm not looking to acquire Higgins anywhere. So I would keep Lamb.
Malik Neighbors.
That's a good call. I would probably, if I'm the Lamb owner and I need to win now, I'm seriously considering that trade. Yeah.
Okay, last one in that kind of range, DK Metcalf.
Assuming Metcalf comes back next week, which I think we expect that he does. Yeah, I would probably make that deal. Yes.
Okay. What about
But
Debo
I might
Samuel?
make it on Monday though, because
Yeah,
I need
yeah,
someone for
yeah,
this
yeah.
week. But
Right. If
I
Lamb is
would
active, yeah.
I would agree to the deal this week, but pull it off on Monday.
Yeah. What about Debo?
No, I'm staying away from Debo.
Okay.
There's too much risk there.
What about Mike Evans?
That's interesting because I was actually considering him in one of my leagues too. He's probably 2 weeks away in my
I guess
mind.
that, yeah. I guess you're only getting half that
Yeah,
back.
yeah. So if he was, if he was coming back this week or maybe even next week, kind of akin to DK Metcalf, then yeah, that would be a strong consideration.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, I was curious because like I am one of those owners where I have CeeDee Lamb and the one league I'm good. Like I'm the 1 seed, so I'm like, all right, I'm fine. I can hold off and see what happens in the playoffs. The other league, I'm like the fringe, like this. I'm like on the back end of the playoffs. I'm like 2 games above 500, right on the fringe. And I'm like, man, do I want to bolt? Do I want that punch to get me through? And I don't know if Lamb, but like I think we've kind of seen the numbers. It's no need to panic on Lamb. There's no need to
Yeah.
just trade him unless you can get a neighbors type player, even maybe like a Garrett Wilson, maybe who's playing very well with
Yeah.
Devontae Adams. Maybe those kind of receivers. Maybe only one notch down. And honestly, if I'm the other team, I have to be very, solidified. I have to be the 1 seed to take on Lamb for one of those receivers. So we'll see. But that's good banter. All right, one more player I want to talk about too is Raheem Mostert. Mostert has looked very good on his touches, but he is the clear RB2 now.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that worries me a little bit about Mostert is I know from when I looked at the numbers, he does have bad home road splits, and he's on the road this week against the Rams. And then on top of that, with Mostert, he started ceding the goal line work a little bit to Devin Achane. So my question for you is, though, he has looked really good on his touches. So is it worth starting Mostert this week? Anything in the numbers that would make you hesitant?
No, I mean, you really just put out exactly what I found. Much better at home versus the road. Achane dominating the touches. I mean, 2-1 last week since the since the bye, the week 6 bye. So he's really unfortunately relegated to a high-end handcuff again. Achane is just so involved in the offense and especially in the passing game that there's just not enough work. It's volume. Yes, he gets 10 or 11 touches per game, and for those 10 or 11, he makes the most out of them. But if you've got a running back who's getting 20 to 25 touches per game, you can't replace that. So yeah, he's kind of fallen down to a high-end handcuff for me. Since they are past their bye, then I'm holding him for the upcoming bye weeks where there's a lot of running back vacancies that you need to fill. I mean, I think he'll be a good option in those weeks, or certainly if something happens to Achane. But just generally, no, he's unfortunately just going to be outside the flex start for me.
So you basically called him a handcuff. So if you're the Achane over, how bad do you want Mostert?
Well, I think you have to do is remind them of the situation in San Francisco with McCaffrey and Mason. And if you have an astute owner and you see that, and you see what the your fellow owner did, how they handled that with McCaffrey's injury early on, and how Mason came into play. I mean, that's the same thing to me. Mostert and Mason are very much in line. If they get their opportunity, we've seen what they can do. They can carry that team. And yeah, if you're an Achane owner and you don't have Mostert, you probably should get him.
Would you trade Nick Chubb to handcuff Devin Chain with Raheem Mostert?
If I had another running back just as a starter, then yes, I would consider it.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting stuff. Yeah, I have Mostert in 2 leagues. Well, I am curious now about the handcuffing. And by the way, we're gonna have a handcuffing show probably in the next week, and that just made me think, Derek, bada bing, there's another show for us. We're gonna be doing handcuffs, so it'll be a fun show as well. All right, let's get into some questions before we close out the show today. Gene, by the way, Luke Picard. I think this is a first time, many times, hopefully in the future. Thanks for joining the show. He has the Denver Broncos defense against the Kansas City Chiefs this week. I don't think a lot of people want to start them. What's your thoughts about streaming? Now, I think, Gene, the question is going to be who's out there? Like, because the Giants against the Panthers, the Bears against the Patriots, the Chargers against the Titans, the Vikings versus the Jags are some of the notable defenses that I like. What's your thoughts, Derek? Any of those kind of stand out? Any other names?
Yeah, Commanders, if they happen to be there, they're probably not. They've been playing pretty well. Yeah, I think you mentioned the Chargers a minute ago. Eagles, the Eagle. I picked up the Eagles last night in one of my leagues because they were hanging out there. So I like that matchup. The Eagles defense has been playing pretty well lately. So yeah, definitely. Stay away from the Broncos this week. Find a stream. There's 4 or 5 good options that we just mentioned.
Yeah, let us know. By the way, Gene will be on for Sunday Live, so join us on the Sunday Live Start Sit Show. We have much more data on injuries at that time, and we're really good. That's when we're the sharpest when it comes to injuries. So join us on Sunday for the live show on this channel 2 hours before kickoff. We would love to see you. We'll answer all your start sit questions on there as well with more data. We also have a flex question here. Rome Adunze, this week, Chicago against the New England Patriots, and then TJ Hawkinson, Minnesota Vikings going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Are you doubling up on the tight ends there, Derek?
Well, that's interesting because, we were talking a little bit before about tight ends, and I'm in that situation, actually. I'm deciding between Hawkinson and Kincaid in one of my leagues, or I can play them both. So that's an interesting thought, and I have both of them in my top 10. So I like Hawkinson against the Jaguars. I think that's a great matchup for him. He only had 5 receptions last week, but he looked solid. He didn't look like he slowed, and I haven't heard any issues with injuries or anything coming back onto the field. So I think we're kind of in that territory where you just unleash Hawkinson. I think he's there.
How did he look last week? He was all right.
He didn't get as many snaps as we hope. They were easing him back, and there's that's understandable. I think he had 5 receptions for 35 yards or whatever it was. But so it wasn't necessarily production, but I watched that game and he looked solid. He looked like his old self. And so I think it really, to me anyway, just from the eye test, it tells me that they're ready to just take off the guardrails on him and just let him run.
Yeah, the other thing that's annoying is that Josh Oliver had a big game, 5 for 58 and 1, just to stick it to you. By the way, you never think about starting. You would probably consider starting Josh Oliver if Hawkinson was out, and then all of a sudden this happens. It's like fantasy football is so annoying. 24 routes versus 39 for Justin Jefferson, so about 60% route participation versus the number 1 receiver. He's going to be eased in. I think the other issue is if you're looking at the slot versus wide, points per game allowed to, which, by the way, we recently updated for the most recent 6 weeks. So go check it out on rasball.com. It gives you more recent data. And if you're looking at the Chicago Bears this week against the New England Patriots, it is a decent matchup. Pats have been beat on the outside. Are they home or away? That's a good question.
It's in Chicago.
That should be good. And how is Rome? Let's see what his home road split is. Oh, wow. He is better on the road. Jeez. Man, oh, man. I don't know, man. I think I guess I want to lean Hawkinson here. The Jags are a pass funnel defense. You throw against the Jags. I'm okay with that. Dunze has been tough to trust this season.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. I don't even think he's in the top 50 in points per game for wide receivers right now.
Yeah, I will say I did have him in my as a prop. It's a prop play last week in my DFS article, and that one scored. That was scored nice. So that I do like him, but again, it's more in that arena. I don't know if I don't really trust him on my fantasy team right now. And again, I watching Hawkinson play he's gonna. It might, whether it's this week or it's one of the coming weeks, but we're going to see the old Hawkinson again, and it's going to be lights out. So I'm there for that. Like you said, Odunze is just not as trustworthy.
Yeah, he popped off last week, 5 for 104. So
he definitely did.
Gets Arizona. Oh man, I don't love it. I'm gonna go. I guess I'm fine with Hawkinson for now. I don't really care for it though. All right, this is the options for Broncos. We have Rams, Cardinals, Patriots. The Patriots on the road against Caleb. Interesting. Arizona has the Jets, and I'm not touching that. And then the Rams are at home against the Miami Dolphins, and I don't feel comfortable with that either. So honestly, the Patriots against Chicago is a little interesting here. If it's Patriots versus Chicago or Denver versus Kansas City, I think you got to go Patriots.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. That's all we got today, folks. Want to thank you once again for joining the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel and join us every single Sunday. We do a 2-hour live start sit show where we answer all your start sit questions, bring you the latest injury and weather updates to help you set your lineups. And of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com. We got premium subscriptions, detailed depth charts, everything you need to know about player projections. We also have the slot versus wide points per game allowed tool and all the great fantasy data tab. And on top of all that, we have a bunch of fantastic writers doing fantastic content, start sits, waiver wire, everything you need every single week to set your lineups and win your fantasy championships. I want to thank my co-host today, Derek Favret. You can follow him at Derek_Favret. Now, Derek writing the DFS article every single week. Anything in the back pocket yet? Any player you're going to probably be having in your lineups?
No, I'm not going to break any of my secrets yet. You got to wait. You got to wait for it. It'll be there Friday, and you'll see it. And I'm also actually picking up Matt's article tomorrow, where the Week 10 starts. So,
nice.
Yeah, so you'll see me tomorrow as well with Matt's article.
Derek double dipping on the week. We love it. We appreciate you, Derek. Make sure you go follow him in. If you have the spare time, you can follow me at Bobby LaMarco on Twitter. Thank you for joining us once again, folks. We are out of here.